I'm not gonna lie, I feel pretty lost when it comes to trying to understand what Marvel and Sony are doing with Spider-Man Brand New Day. It feels like every week there is some crazy new rumor about the film that completely changes my outlook on what the film story might be trying to tackle and what characters are going to be featured heavily within the film. Now, I want to make it very clear, this is not a bad thing, as I genuinely trust Marvel and Sony when it comes to specifically Tom Holland's Spider-Man franchise, as they have yet to let me down. However, it's honestly just crazy new rumor after crazy new rumor, and this past week we probably got the craziest one yet, and that is that Bruce Banner is going to be making his return to the MCU in Spider-Man Brand New Day. And I want to look at a bunch of different rumors surrounding the film, a lot of which have come out in the last couple of weeks, and try to get an idea as to where they may be going with this film and just discuss my overall thoughts on where it seems like this film is headed. And I think it's only logical to start with the most recent one and probably the most interesting, and that is the Hulk playing a role in this movie. Now, in the article where it was revealed that Bruce Banner would be making his return in Brand New Day, it did not mention that the Hulk would also be making an appearance. However, I'm gonna assume that it's implied. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner, and I can't wait to see Bruce Banner and Peter Parker interact, but if they're going to be including him in the film, it's most likely so they can use the Hulk to help sell the film as well. And I know Spider-Man does not need help selling his own films. He is one of the most popular superhero characters of all time, if not the most popular, and the Tom Hollands Spider-Man movies have done phenomenal. But let's be honest here, if you can bump the $1.1 billion total up to something like 1.3 with the inclusion of Hulk, a studio's always gonna go for that. Now, I will say, when thinking about my ideal Spider-Man 4, I would have kept Peter more secluded after the events of Spider-Man No Way Home and not had any appearances from any other major MCU heroes. Now, I'm not somebody who has hated the inclusion of characters like Iron Man and Nick Fury in previous films, as I personally enjoy them, and it's kind of the whole reason you brought Spider-Man into the MCU, so that you can have him interact with more of Marvel's most iconic characters. But due to what happened in Spider-Man No Way Home and presumably nobody remembering Peter Parker, I thought this would just be a perfect opportunity to let him stand on his own. However, the idea of him interacting with Banner and possibly fighting alongside or against the Hulk does sound pretty awesome, and considering we have yet to see Bruce and Peter interact in the MCU, it's something new and it should be relatively exciting. But of course, this does bring up the question, and it's probably my biggest hurdle to this idea, is why is Bruce Banner in the Spider-Man movie? Does he remember who Peter is? Does he have some sort of connection to the villains of the film? Which, as of right now, the rumored villains of the film are Tombstone, Boomerang, and Scorpion, as well as I'm going to throw in Mr. Negative, as he's been consistently rumored for this film for like the last year. And I want to start by discussing the trio of Tombstone, Boomerang, and Scorpion, as those were supposedly recently revealed at a Disney consumer product show, and yeah, I'm honestly all for it, especially Scorpion and Tombstone. I will admit, Boomerang does not do a whole lot for me. However, if you cast someone fun in the role and you have him as like a fun villain at the opening of the movie, I totally get it. However, I highly doubt Boomerang is going to get any more than like 5 minutes of screen time. But when looking at Scorpion and Tombstone, those are some fun Spider-Man villains that I'm eagerly awaiting to see on the big screen, especially Scorpion. And it's honestly crazy to think that we might finally be getting a payoff for the Spider-Man Homecoming end credit scene. Yes, maybe it took almost a decade to get there. However, I am excited by the idea of seeing Scorpion, as I really did like the casting of Michael Mando from his work in Better Call Saul and Far Cry 3. Additionally, I just think Scorpion is a lot of fun and can make for some really awesome fights with Spider-Man. And I honestly hope they use this as an opportunity to get J.K. Simmons more screen time as J. Jonah Jameson, as he is usually the one who funds the creation of Scorpion's suit. And maybe it's a creation funded by Tombstone, which I think could also make a lot of sense, as he is one of the bigger crime bosses in all of New York City. And I like the idea of incorporating more of the kind of street level crime, the crime bosses in New York City, into the Spider-Man franchise. It doesn't always have to be Kingpin, even though, of course, I would have loved to see Spider-Man go toe-to-toe with Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, but depending on who they cast, this could absolutely be a perfectly fine substitute, and I'm very interested to see a pairing of Tombstone and Scorpion together. I will admit, though, it is a bit odd that they're going with this specific storyline if this information comes out true, considering what we just saw in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, where Scorpion played a massive role, and obviously Tombstone is being set up to be a major part of future seasons. So I think it's a little bit weird that they're kind of double dipping here in this storyline. But then again, how many people actually saw Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? I hope if you haven't seen it yet, you absolutely do, because that show was absolutely phenomenal. And I'm not against the idea of using Scorpion and Tombstone again. I just thought it was a little bit odd. And then there is also the other major rumor that has been pretty persistent for the last like 6 months to even a year, and that is potentially the involvement of Mr. Negative in the film. And I am absolutely all for that. I think Mr. Negative is a phenomenal villain, and I think using specifically Martin Lee in the circumstances of where we have Peter at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, he has no friends, he has no family. I think it would make a lot of sense for him to start volunteering at somewhere like Feast and then slowly develop a mentor-mentee relationship with Martin Lee, who he slowly finds out is not exactly who he says he is. And when we think about the potential involvement of somebody like Hulk, Mr. Negative does make sense, considering they're both characters with these dark alter egos that they struggle to control. Now, obviously, Bruce Banner in the MCU has become very good at it, but I do think it would be an interesting pairing to see how one handles it a little better, one handles it not so well at times, and you could also use Mr. Negative to maybe bring out some of the darker elements of Hulk. And I know a lot of people have been clamoring to see more of the Savage Hulk again. This could potentially be a way to do it. However, if you're also going to have Tombstone, Scorpion, and Boomerang, and then throw in Mr. Negative, that's where you get to the point where I'm starting to worry a little bit about having too many villains, because I do not want to see Tombstone and Scorpion really shortchange. I don't think they are typically the main villains of a Spider-Man film. They typically work better kind of operating as the second or third fiddle, but I could definitely see it. It's just, you're taking on a lot, but I do trust Marvel and Sony specifically when it comes to this universe. And then of course we get to the whole Sadie Sink aspect of the film, which I am so excited to see Sadie Sink in the MCU. She is a phenomenal actress with her work in Stranger Things as well as The Whale, and I think the MCU is very wise to get her in this universe, as she's only going to continue to rise in popularity as time goes on. But when it comes to who she's actually playing in the film, nobody has a damn clue. I've seen so many characters speculated, like Firestar, Jean Grey, Gwen Stacy, and the most recent and probably the most popular I've seen is Mayday Parker. And obviously, considering the fact that Peter and MJ do not have a kid within the MCU, this would have to be a Mayday from a different universe, and it's speculated that it's going to be Tobey Maguire's Mayday. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and I fully expect that he and Andrew Garfield are going to make some sort of return in the next couple of years, most likely in Secret Wars, but shoehorning that into Spider-Man 4 sounds like an absolute mess if that's what it ends up being. Now, I totally understand Sony is looking at the box office return from Spider-Man No Way Home and saying, yeah, we're absolutely doing everything in our power to get the other Spider-Man characters in it, because that movie made so much damn money. But adding that into potentially taking on 3 to 4 villains that are more street level villains, throwing in a multiverse element as well as the Hulk, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Again, Tobey Maguire is my favorite Spider-Man of all time, and I would love to see what he's up to after the events of No Way Home and just where his life has been since Spider-Man 3, because we get a little information of it in No Way Home, and I would absolutely love to see more. But when thinking about incorporating that into the story that we may already have involving a bunch of villains as well as the Incredible Hulk, it just sounds like a recipe for disaster for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm immensely excited to see who Sadie Sink is playing within this film. I assume it's going to be probably a pretty substantial character, as I would assume Marvel wants to keep her in the fold for the next couple of years, and I think a mutant would be a really great way to do that. However, when it comes to potentially being Mayday Parker from somewhere else in the multiverse, please don't do that, Marvel. Just, you already got enough on your hands. Just deliver a more street level grounded Spider-Man and I will be absolutely satisfied. Yeah, you want to maybe bump up the box office a little more and bring in a bit more spectacle. Yes, bring in the Hulk. Seeing the Hulk and Spider-Man maybe go toe to toe in the middle of Manhattan would be absolutely crazy, and I just don't think you need to shoehorn the multiverse into this. But again, I do understand if I was sitting in Sony shares and was somebody who just did not give a shit about story, I just wanted to make as much money as possible, I would look at the No Way Home box office return and say, yeah, find a way to get those two in the movie again, or at least one of them back into the movie so we could get as many people in the theater as possible. However, I want to know what you think about all these rumors and supposed leaks surrounding Spider-Man Brand New Day. Does this make you more excited for the film, less excited for the film? Let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in another video.